Well, thank you very much. This is the second half of the Black History conversation on Friday, the 15th of October. And in this part of the session, we're just going to introduce the team who organised Black History conversations, and we're going to move through onto some of the things that are happening during Black History Month and then 2021 in Britain and possibly in other parts of the world. And we're also going to be looking at some of the resources that are now being published to support a better understanding about Black history, and in fact about global history. Okay, so unfortunately, Jean-Samuel Michaela wasn't able to join us, but very big thank you to Tony Cox, who's a researcher at the Commonwealth Studies area of the University of London. Apologies for getting that wrong on your title. Okay, so it was good to have Unita with us and introduce you. And it'll also be good on a future occasion to meet Michaela Jean-Samuel again and see some of his artwork and hear about what he's doing. Right, the team of three of us started this. Simon from Belong Nottingham, and I especially wanted to share this, Marcia, because this also includes reference to Newstead Abbey, where Simon's got an exhibition at the moment. So one of the things that I want to say, Simon, is we need to check that this is going to be okay to go onto the website, because I think we need to introduce ourselves and explain who we are. You can explain who you are if you want to. Believe that.
Well, yeah, you can do. I have spent much of the past 20 years working on sustainability in farming and trade. I still do. Currently engaged in a small project for Fair Trade International, looking at some of the issues that remain in cotton and textiles around not just environment, but human rights, social issues, and so on. Also recently was part of a publication just launched looking at misinformation around debates about cotton. So I do write regularly on that. I am part-time co-op member pioneer in Derby, looking at supporting the local community fund that comes out of the co-op. Still chair European Movement Derbyshire, and I'm also editor of an online newspaper, part of the Bylines network called Central Bylines. So Marcia and Juanita, I may well be approaching you to cover some of what you're talking about for that paper. So that's me.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Simon. And just to say that your exhibition is on at Newstead Abbey at the moment. And I wanted to just recognise James Schumer and Abdullah Susi, because one of the things that we're focusing on is recognising the Africans who have supported an important part of Black British history.
And we're hoping to focus on Jacob Wainwright in our next project. We're hopefully going to have confirmation of the funding soon, because Jacob Wainwright left a diary, which exists in a full version only in French, recording the journey with the body of David Livingstone over a period of months. And we have quite a lot of records of his time in the UK. And I think what he encountered, his experience still says a lot today about experiences of Black people in the UK. So fingers crossed we don't get cancelled by the culture war.
That's really good. And also I was fascinated, and this is just a personal thing, that I didn't realise Newstead Abbey and its estate had so many other connections with Black history, and that they had a property in St Mary's, Jamaica. So that's something else that we can perhaps follow up again in the future, Simon.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Now I'm one of the directors of Learning Links International. Caroline, who's with us again today, is also one of the directors of Learning Links International. I've managed to get our website wrong there. It's Learning Links International. I'm currently in Australia, so I acknowledge the traditional owners of the beautiful land on which I'm currently living, which belongs to the sovereign people of the First Nations and was never ceded. I pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, their elders, past, present and future. Always was, always will be. That is such a powerful statement. And the two flags of Aboriginal people on the big island of Australia and the Torres Strait Islanders is the blue and green and white flag. So my research is currently into exploring ways to unlock global histories, our shared history, and to seek ways to be part of the reparative justice movement. So that interests me. And the picture's at the bottom, and I'm being a bit witty here, having my name upside down, because I am here in Australia. I have to acknowledge this. As you can see, the weather's not always brilliant. It can be sunny with very dark skies. That's looking north here, further up the Dandenong Ranges. Spring is here. We have incredibly unusual plants flowering and leafing and being wonderful. And yet we also have the European influence, and there are bulb fields here. But as we're all on lockdown, none of us can go and see them, but I sneak to peek through the hedge. Okay, so I'd like to keep people in touch, up to date about what's happening here. The Stories from the Heart's a really good website. The Uluru Statement from the Heart is behind all of this. And at the moment in Victoria, there's a Camp Truth Telling initiative. The URUC Justice Commission, which has just started. So we're hearing about what's going on with this Truth Telling Commission on the news on a fairly regular basis. So there's contacts there if anybody's interested in following up that. Now, David, I've just given you one slide just to recognise and thank you so much for all you've done, but also to say what a brilliant presentation you made to start off our Black History Month activities with Slaves and Highlanders, the Silenced Histories of Scotland and the Caribbean. So as a historian and independent researcher, I also would quite like to read some of your other books. And My Little Town of Cromarty, History of a Northern Scottish Town, sounds fascinating for me. So just a little bit there about David. I don't know if you want to come in, David, and tell us what's been happening with the rollout of the book.
Oh, well, I must say I've been delighted with responses to the book. You know, I'm particularly delighted to have had some people in Guyana reading it and commenting on it. So I mean, I suppose it is, you know, to some extent it is largely aimed at a Scottish audience, but it's great to feel that it's resonating beyond these borders. So it's been a really important moment for me, a really important month this month.
All right, that's great then. So just to say, last week we thank you, David. We had the BBC listen. We had Gwyneth Kensler and other colleagues speaking about this statue. But just to say that the BBC Listening Project also reported on that. So we're in good company as to exploring the stories. And here we've got the Congolese delegation shaking hands with this statue. And at the moment, there's voting going on today and tomorrow, I think, in Denby. I think it's the first time that there's been a community vote on whether to keep a statue or not. But also this wonderful statue of Mrs. Betty Campbell, Wales's first black head teacher. A great deal of pride in Wales about this statue, and there's been all kinds of activities going on down in South Wales. Now, this one I've included because one of the things that would be great would be to recognise some of the black seamen who lost their lives in the First World War. I've included this because when Simon and I first met, we had a speaker at the Black History annual conference that we did from the Royal Commission in Wales, and she spoke about this. But more recently, we've discovered that in Bangor Cemetery, there are two of the people off the ship that was sunk off Anglesey, buried in Bangor Cemetery. So the North Wales Africa Society are looking at perhaps a way that they may be able to learn more about the lives of these seamen and to respect their lives. Also, new commissions to reframe the legacy of Thomas Picton at the National Museum, Cardiff. So just to let you know the stuff going on down there. And then this is an interesting one that was sent to me from the National Association of Head Teachers. Now, if you want to decolonise the curriculum, this is where to start, I think, get in with the National Association of Head Teachers. And this is available to read online, and it's some very interesting stories from leaders in education. So if you want me to send you a copy of that link, John, I will. Also to say in Scotland, there's all sorts of things going on. Empire community in Scotland's built environment. Unfortunately, it's going on at exactly the same time as we're speaking now, but no doubt there'll be the recording to listen to. So that's a really interesting one. I'm particularly interested in hearing about the National Trust story in Scotland because I'm working on trying to work out what the National Trust story in Wales is. Also, other things that are going on in Scotland, got a director's talk from the museum on reparation and restitution of museum objects, which we've already been looking at, and also connecting and rethinking the histories of slavery and the Scottish Highlands. And I noticed that you're featured in there on the panel, David, so that's great. Also legacies of slavery, lots more things going on. Jeff Palmer's leading this talk, and that's going to be next Thursday. And reconnecting and rethinking the histories. I'm not sure if that's the same one, but that's another one, David, where you're sure if it's the same one. Okay, and David also, I think it was David, let me know that this book is free to read online. It was Neos, Glasgow's Built Heritage, Tobacco, the Slave Trade and Abolition. So it's a great resource to be able to read online, and it's a good one that's been around quite a while, but still really valuable. UCL are also doing Black History Month talks and celebrating, so you can look those up. And we've got this one, let's have a transatlantic talk about race. So that's later in November, so that'll give us all a chance to recover because as somebody's pointed out, there's just too many things going on at the moment, and there always is. Now, one of the things, nothing to do with Black History Month, that I came across, which is fascinating, is that Google, diversity.google, record and post conversations. And there are some absolutely fabulous conversations there, so definitely well worth exploring. So see, I've got nothing better to do than research the web. But also I'm signed up on yet another Future Learn course. This time I'm signed up on the country houses in the British Empire, how imperialism transformed Britain's colonial countryside. So I'm in week 2 of that at the moment. So these are all free. The Empire will be an interesting one to look at next. Controversies of British imperialism, be a good one. That's one's led by the University of Exeter. And the history of slavery and the British Caribbean, our colleagues in Scotland, Christine White, I know, has been involved in that one, and that's a fascinating course too. So what brilliant resources. I mean, there is, you know, there's no reason not to understand about Black history. This is a document that came out for 2007 by the Anti-Slavery International Campaign. It's exceptionally interesting and well worth reading online. Brilliant one. Also another session that's going on. You'd have to check it at the bottom there, because we're going to be looking at the stories of indentured labour in some of our sessions to come. So that's a kind of reminder about that one, and that's University of Warwick. Interestingly, the New York Times tribes to confront bias against descendants of enslaved people. This is a really interesting story because of a conflict between First Nations who had enslaved Black people who now consider themselves to be members of those First Nations, but then finding that these people were being deprived of rights today in 2021. And the most important right today is to be able to get a COVID vaccine. And people were being turned away from hospitals because there were Black people who were considering themselves as part of one of the US First Nations. So just an amazing story, that, and well worth us keeping an eye on that story. The Black history story of the United States of America is very different from the Black history story of the UK, of Canada, of Australia, all African countries. So just to show you that things are going on around the world, I'm in touch with Canada, and the Vaughan Public Library send me their information. They've had some extremely good lectures, and these are the joys of Zoom at the moment. You don't get much sleep, but there's all kinds of interesting things for me to watch here. So reflecting on racism and discrimination, that's coming up soon, Canadian time. And that's another little bit about that one. So Jeff Palmer's got a podcast. This is on Google Podcasts, but also on Byline Times podcast. So Simon, this is part of the organisation you're linked with.
Yes, so we have a link. We're not, so the link is, I'm not sure how to put it because we're a network, but yes, we are in the same thing, so it's great to see this.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. So it also gave me ideas about how we're going to develop our website, and I now understand why you talk about podcasts, because I've listened to quite a few now. So Jeff Palmer's a good friend and supporter and colleague, and I'd like to say I've done my bit to support him too. So just to say that also on the Bylines Times podcasts, someone who's going to come and speak with us, the author of Blood Legacy, Alex Renton, and a podcast about his story, and also a podcast by Satnam Sanghera, who's from Wolverhampton, on the long shadow of the empire. And based on comments made earlier, I think that would be really interesting if we can get him to come and speak, because authors quite like to talk about their books. Well, I hope they will. Oopsie-daisy. All right, I think we're getting on through now. Thank you very much then. Lisa's going to join us at some stage, but I just wanted you to let know some of the things that are going on. Marcia?
Is there any way that we can have a copy of this PowerPoint? Because I wanted to note down some of the addresses, website addresses, but it moved very quickly.
Okay. So what I want I want some advice is on how I can share a PowerPoint. I'm not sure if it'll be possible to attach it to the website, so I'll try that first. If I can't do that, because it's too big to send, they're too big to send these PowerPoints by email. But I will work on a way around it for you, Marcia, because one of the things I do is whenever I find anything, I just add it onto this week's PowerPoint, which is very easy for me, but I can't share it with other people other than doing it in this way. And yes, it'll be on the recording, but that's not quite the same. Anybody else want to add anything else that's going on at the moment? Yeah?
There is a way of sharing PowerPoint, because when I did the one about the history of our house, I could send a link to it somehow on the cloud.
Oh, right.
There is a way to do that.
Well, that'd be lovely.
Your PowerPoint. There's a way to share it. You don't have to send the whole file, you just send a link to it.
Right. While I'm just at it, because I'd not quite got them all in the right order. Just a minute, let me just press escape. If you can bear with me.
That's right.
Right, now my favourite person, David Alashuga, do you call him? Alashuga. This is a great book for kids and people who don't do an awful lot of reading. So that's a good way to get into this, but there's something so exciting coming up. This, which will be available from DK, so it'll be a well-produced, interestingly produced book by DK, has a foreword by David Alashuga, so that gives it credibility for me. Big ideas simply explained. Well, the joy of this book is that you can look, if you look on Amazon or wherever, you can look inside the book and you can read quite a lot of the book without managing to get hold of it. And there's some really, really good presenters, not just US, but also British, including Robin Walker and others that you people might be here. I've just cut and pasted a one page that we were all Africans, so it starts from that basis, and it's got, this is the blurb about it: profiles of key people, movements and events. A Black History book brings together accounts of significant ideas and milestones in Black history and culture. This vital and thought-provoking book presents a bold and accessible overview of the history of the African continent and its peoples, from the earliest human migrations to modern Black communities in the African diaspora. So I think this could be a real, a really special addition to the resource that we've got, because if there's a copy of this in schools, children will be reading this. If families want their children to understand about Black history, then this could well be a really good way in. So also to say that April Louise Pennant and her father went to Penryn Castle, and they did 3 podcasts, and these are Times podcasts, the Times podcasts, and they're really very, very interesting and explore some of the issues that Caroline and I are particularly interested in exploring in North Wales. That's a good one. Also, if you've not looked at blackhistorymonth.org.uk, there's loads of information there. And this is especially for you, John, drilling down decolonializing language. That's how we say it. So there's an article about that. And also there's a Black History Month resource pack, but I'm not sure if you actually have to send away for that or not, in which case bit more difficult. And also an interesting event that's coming up with Professor Patrick Vernon. I didn't know Patrick Vernon was a professor now, but that's good. At Goldsmiths, their Black History annual lecture next week. I think why Black Lives Matter is part of British Black history. So I think it's exciting to see different perspectives. Right, at some stage we are going to have colleagues from Ireland joining us, and so we want to understand, but interestingly find out that Christine Keneally, she's actually based in the US, and looking at the Irish diaspora. So these are just some things to remind me that we're going to be doing some work on this. And this is interesting because there's often this point about the British slave trade, and yet this is a quote from this book, but it'll be interesting to put in all this in context. And also you can look inside and read half the book. And also we've invited to one of our Black History Month activities that we're doing in North Wales Jamaica Society. We've got a Black History Book Club that meets every Wednesday morning. And Kathleen Chater's going to talk to us. Now, this book was written a lot earlier than Miriam Kaufman's book on Black Tudors. And also we've discovered another colleague who's written, be joining us about that. Oh, thank you. Here we have, oh, the book's come. We've got Caroline holding that book up, so we've got to read that by next Wednesday.
It's literally just arrived about 10 minutes ago.
This is what I like, up to the minute. And also we're going to hopefully engage somebody from the Wilberforce Institute in Hull to come and speak with us, and Sherilyn Lynn Haggerty seems a possibility. So those are some of my notes in a way, but some information, and I'll work out how to send it to you, Marcia. But I'd be really interested if you would tell us about your work, and would you be able to do that next week?
Yes, yeah, no problem. Yes.
Because
Yes, I just
there's
checked, yeah. A diary.
what's fascinating, I think, about the history walks is that there's history walks going on with Lawrence Westgarth in Liverpool, and there are walks going on in Bristol as well, and I'm sure there are in London. But it's really interesting that walks are becoming a real way of getting people to see the evidence in our industrial communities of Black history. So that'd be great.
Yeah, the week after the 29th would be better. I've just checked my diary. I always need to, and next week will be difficult. I've got an important appointment.
No, that's
But
all
the
right.
29th, if that's all right with you.
That's fine. That's really great. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. We've got lots of things to catch up on, and people who are offering opportunities to make presentations, so that'll be great. And I think it's also really good, and John, I'm thinking of you in this too. It's really good to be doing something from the Midlands, from Birmingham, because in 2007, some places made efforts to create museums and all sorts, but Birmingham's 2007 efforts were different and didn't have the same kind of impact to improve understanding in the community. Okay then, so are there any other things anybody wants to add? If not, I'm going to, all right, Simon.
Yes.
All right, that's interesting. Simon's put in the comments that the word quilombo is common in Paraguay. Very interesting. He didn't know the origin. It's used to describe something in a great mess that needs cleaning up. Now, Caroline's got an interesting book to share with us. Switch your sound on, Caroline.
Okay. Yeah, I picked this up in Tesco's a couple of days ago for my granddaughter. They didn't have a Black History book display as such, but this was quite visible amongst the children's books. And it's an Usborne book, which is a well-known publisher for children. And it's called What is Racism? And it goes through all different aspects of racism. Can you see it all right there? And it's got questions with the answers under the flaps. It's very good.
In our Black History Book Club on Wednesday, Caroline read it to us, and it's absolutely fascinating, and it's just a real, it's tangible. You go and buy this and work with your children with it. Thanks, Marcia.
Who's the author? Sorry, I'm just writing this down.
It says, what's the author? Katie Danes and Jordan Akpajaro.
Okay.
And then it's got a child psychologist, Dr. Isha Muller, who's involved in it as well. But the last page is all about how we can stop racism.
Okay.
There's lots of very good ideas, and it's very child friendly, but it would be a good point of discussion for adults as well. Yeah. I also bought this one because there was a display in Morrison's Black History books, which is very good. And it's an empowering celebration of growing up Black. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Got lovely illustrations by all sorts of different artists, and it's very, very good. Again, good for discussion.
Yeah.
Can you see it all right?
Yes, I'm just looking at the author. Was that David?
Depo Adeola, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And that was published by Penguin, so it should be easy to find. Okay. So those are the two books I bought this week. And I've read through them.
But having been involved in Black History Month in North Wales with Sibani and yourself since 2007, I don't think we would ever in previous years have seen local supermarkets selling those sorts of books and prioritising those sorts of displays. So it's really, the impact of Black Lives Matter means that a lot more people are taking responsibility for doing things than perhaps previously. So unless there's anything else anybody else wants to add, we'll wrap this session up. Okay, well, thanks ever so much, everybody. It's been really good again, and I'll make sure that we can put the PowerPoint, make that available for people in a timely way. Thanks a lot then. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
I'm going to
Thanks.
stay on with Mr. Barney now.